Hi, everybody. Welcome to Steel Roses podcast. This podcast was created for women by women. You're hearing Jenny today. I'm hosting this episode, and I have a very special guest. I have my friend Abi here with me today. Abi, welcome to the show. Abby and
Thank you, Jenny. I'm super excited to be here.
oh, of course. Abby and I
Oh,
met.
sorry, I messed up your intro.
Oh my God, no, you're okay. Um, Abby and I met, let's see, like a year ago, virtually. Is that how it is? I think, right? I think it was about a
Yeah,
year
I
ago.
think you joined. No, well, I think you joined like about a year and a half. I think you joined in like August 2022, right?
Yeah, it's been like a year and a
Yeah,
half. So,
yeah.
Abby and I have known each other. We met first professionally, and we worked together for about a year or so. And over the course of that year, I had the great pleasure of getting to know Abby. And Abby, I'm going to talk about you to your face right now. So
That's okay.
when I first met Abby, I I will admit I was not sure if you liked me or not, and I think we were just trying to test each other out, which is totally fine because I've gotten when I was in my younger years, I got pretty consistent feedback that I had RBF, and a lot of people up front were like, "We're not really sure about Jenny." Um, but over time, as we got to know each other, one of the most um, wonderful and valuable things that I found with you was that you were very much almost like a North Star. And in saying that, I mean, there were instances where I would be stressed out about something or frustrated or just like worried. And I would literally say to Abby, like, hey, like, do you just have a couple of minutes? Like, can I just run something by you? And Abby had this calming, which you I don't know if you're gonna be like, are you crazy? But Abby always came and was like, this is the logical and calming way that you can handle this, or these are the tools that you can use to help get yourself through whatever the scenario is. And I always found that really wonderful. And I just wanted to tell you that, like, that was always something that I was like, well, Abby will help me out here. Like, let me talk to her and see if she has any tips for me to get through this anxious situation or get through this anxiety. Um, so thank you for that. And I'm going to give you some space here to just introduce yourself to the listeners and let them know a little bit about yourself.
Yes, yeah, I'm Abby, as you said. Yes, I have a professional background with Jenny. We worked in the same industry. I also have a background in public health. I got my MPH back in 2019. So that's sort of my academic area of study and my focused area, and kind of where I come and approach a lot of the ways I look at the world, which I'm sure will come out in this conversation we're going to have. So, yeah, I consider myself kind of a interesting individual, at least in the sense that my career has gone in a lot of different directions, and I never really plan to be where I am, I guess, but I'm enjoying it and I'm just rolling with it. And yeah, I don't know what else, if you anything else specifically you want me to touch on.
Well, I like that you basically just said like you didn't really plan to be exactly where you are, but you kind of just rolled with it. So you've had like, because I know when I met you, I didn't know about the MPH, and I didn't know you had a background in public health. I didn't know, all the education background you had. And it's interesting because Abby was like the secret, like she had like the secret in her back pocket because I always had a sense with Abby that I was like, she's got something and I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. And it's you do have this great knowledge. Um, what I think that I found the most guidance with you was when we would talk about like anxiety and dealing with situations that are unpleasant. To be perfectly honest with the listeners, like there's times professionally when you have to have unpleasant discussions or you're put in situations where you feel awkward about having to deal with something. And Abby always gave me really great tips in that area. So, Abby, professionally speaking, if there was advice you could give to listeners, especially like young women coming up in any of their industries, but women coming up in corporate America or their jobs or trying to get their professions like kicked off, what would you say to them? Like coming to the table, they're new and they maybe don't have a ton of work history. They're nervous about starting their new jobs What are your thoughts there?
Oh yeah, that was definitely me not too long ago. So I relate to that heavily. But yeah, I think in the course of my very short career so far, I think the most important thing I can give is just really be willing to learn and be willing to dive in, especially on things you don't have experience with. I think it's totally okay. Like when you're new in your career, no one expects you to know everything. Like you are still an intern in some ways. You're there to learn. And you can really leverage that to your advantage because you can use that to get experience in a lot of different areas or in a lot of different projects. And really just having an open mind, even if something, especially if something doesn't seem initially like really attractive to you. Like I think I learned a lot, the most about myself when I took on projects or were in situations where it wasn't something I would have chosen for myself necessarily, but um, everything you don't like leads you closer to finding something you do like. And I think that's really important when you're younger in your career and you don't know what's all out there. And you might have gone through college and applying for your first job with a very specific vision of what you wanted your first job to look like or what you want your whole career path to look like. And I think it's kind of cliche, but when you look back at like the career histories of a lot of really successful people, like even Oprah, Elon Musk, as much as I am not really a fan, like basically every single person outside of like politics has a non-linear career path and have done a lot of really interesting things. And I think you can just really leverage that to your advantage and just being open to learning, being open to trying new things, and also just being a delight to work with. Just really trying to be a team player. And I think another thing, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but another thing is to like, it's okay to like ask for help and flag when you have a question or you don't understand something. And really trying to have a mentor or foster a really strong relationship with like a supervisor, someone else in your company, someone in your industry, maybe not in your company. The more people you can sort of have like in your corner, so to speak, that you can bounce ideas off of and talk about situations with. Like you and I did, Jenny. Like I know you were also super helpful to me in all the situations. So I really can't thank you enough for your feedback. And I think it's a really good example of like women supporting and building each other up. Like sometimes we had no idea what was going on, or we were both super angry and couldn't think straight. And then even then we were like, okay, we got to calm down and think about how we're going to rationalize this. But like it was just nice to be in it together. And yeah, I think lean on your community for your support, and just be open minded.
I think that you touched on a lot of really important things, and we don't talk a lot on this podcast about like the beginning, basically. Like a lot of the guests that come on are in like the midstream, or they're like scaling and they're doing really wonderful, and we hear that. But the beginning steps, and Abby had said something really important here and very valuable, is that like, you know, there are, if you look at most highly successful people, their track history is all over the place. Like they did try a bunch of different things. They did investigate a bunch of different pathways. I have only professionally, well, I've always worked in medical. And then after college, I always worked in medcoms. That was kind of like, that was it. I did logistics for a medcoms agency, and then I was just medcoms. And I got to a point, I think I was like when I was in my mid 20s, mid to late 20s, where I remember being like, I don't know if this is for me. I'm not sure that I want to do this. But I had gone so far and I didn't want to take a pay cut. And I was trying to get out of it, and I started interviewing for other roles, and people were like, what do you, and the interviewers were literally saying to me, like, what are you doing? You have all this work history here. Like, just go back to what you were doing. And so I ended up just right back in it. But now I have the podcast. This is my outlet. But I do encourage people. Like Abby had a really great point too, where she said like, you know, nobody expects you to know everything. So if you're starting out in your career, even if you're in the first 5 years of your career, that's still considered starting out. Like you are still learning the
Oh
rope,
yeah.
because for every I've been at 9 agencies and in 17 years. And for every agency, it always took me about a year or so to learn the ropes of that agency. And then it would take me another year to be great at my job. And then by the third year, I was like, okay, where am I at? Like, where am I going from here? Um, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And it's okay to part of the way through your career say like, you know what, not really sure that I want to do this. Like, I'm not sure that this is the right path for me. So I think that's really valuable that you're giving that kind of feedback.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I really do think, yeah, and I guess I am still at the start of my career because I don't even think I've been in the working world for 5 years. Got my first job, what? Yeah, mid 2019. So coming up on 5 years here soon.
Oh yeah, you're getting
So
there.
yeah,
You're
I
getting
really
there.
still feel like yeah, getting there. Still a lot to learn. And yeah, I feel like I have people ask me this a lot of they're like, do you want to stay in the role you're working in or in the industry you're in forever? And it's like, well, I don't really know. I could be a totally different person when I wake up tomorrow. So I'm kind of just playing it day by day. And I think that's like really the most generous thing I can do for myself is when you can be too totalitarian or like too predictive, then I think God kind of just laughs on your plans and shake things up just for fun. And those are great growing and learning experiences, but really just having an open mind to
Hmm.
the possibilities can really, I think, can reduce stress and anxiety kind of a lot.
I think it's I've said for quite some time, and now even to like my little guys, like one of my kids said to me the other day something about something about going to college, and I was like, well, you don't have to go to college anymore. I was like, I'm just saying, like, because when I was growing up, it was like, oh, you go to college, like that's it, like that is the only path you can take, and I'm like, nowadays you can do so many other things, and I think that there's a huge problem where we're forcing 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and 18-year-olds to pick a major in college, stick with that major, and then get jobs with it. Like by the time when you graduate high school and then you graduate college, like you are a totally different person. And then even when you graduate college and then
Yeah,
5 years from then,
yeah.
you're even more of a different person because your mind is growing and changing and who you are is changing. There's no way. I mean, granted, I wanted to be a creative writer when I was in high school. So now I'm getting to dabble a little bit in that. But like, you
Yeah,
know,
you're doing it.
it's like, we're forcing our youth in America to make these major decisions and major life decisions. It's like, but you haven't even really discovered yourself yet. So I think it's really wonderful that you're being so open and that you are willing to like, look into things and research things. One of the big things that Abby had impressed me with several times over was your willingness to take stuff on and be like, well, let me research this and dig into the details and see what it is and put together all this information and, figure this out. And it would be for like small things, big things, whatever. And that is really where you're going to learn the most. Like, even you'll hear by the time this episode airs, this other episode would have aired already, but I just recorded an entire episode on like how to podcast and like how to put, if you want to start in it, like what are you going to do and what are the steps? And when I decided to podcast, I literally spent like 2 months researching how to do this and playing with it and checking out all the different platforms and like, how do I pull the audio file down from my recording platform and pull it over here? And, you know, it it I could have at any point said, "You know what? This isn't for me. This is annoying. Like I'm not into it, but I love it. I love production. So this is like my jam." But like that's an expansion and you are embracing that, and in your moment right now, like yeah, you're working professionally, but you're embracing the fact that you can expand into different things.
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, and I love going on those weird little rabbit holes, like where you kind of just forget everything else exists and get into like a one-track mind. There's definitely things that I have to like I'm putting them off because I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna get into a rabbit hole on this, so I need to wait until I have like the time and the space and the energy to do it. But yeah, I do think being able to like commit to something and really focus and specialize just to learn is good. And I think that can look like different things for different people. But yeah, for me, it's definitely come up in that one area and being able to try things out without sort of like marrying myself to it forever.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's a smart approach. And I think a lot of people probably would have benefited from that. My husband and I talk all the time about people that we know that went to college and are doing nothing with their degrees. And I'm talking people that I mean, these are people that went to like heavy schools, they have their masters. Like these are people that are like educated people, but they're like doing nothing, to do with their degrees. And it's just, it's such a burden financially on people to go to higher education and then to not work in their field and not be making that salary. It's like mind blowing. It's mind blowing. I just, I go to the financial part because I'm 40 and I'm still paying my student loans. So it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole
um,
other can of
it's like a
worms.
whole other situation. I get very jealous of other countries with this kind of
Oh yeah.
stuff because like healthcare and education in other countries is like totally different. Like this is yeah, what we
Yeah.
do, the burden, like when you graduate from college, and I'm fortunate because I didn't have to pay for all of my education. Um but I have family members and friends that graduated and they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's like, how are you ever supposed to pay that back? Like, you know?
Yeah. Right. I break out in hives when I hear about how much money some people owe. Like I would not be sleeping at night. Like,
Oh,
and it's one of those things where I think I hope all that gets forgiven and paid back. But if it doesn't, I mean, some people are going to be paying it off for a very long time. And I
yeah.
have friends who are working to get the forgiveness, but still that's not guaranteed. They make it really difficult and has to be processed and everything. So, yeah,
Do
whole another
you
crisis.
do you it's that, and hence me being telling my kids like, well, you don't have to go to college, guys. Like, you don't have to do it.
Mm-mm.
Which
No.
I very firmly believe that they don't. I do think that there's a lot of pathways out there that don't require it. One of my favorite
Hmm.
people is which Abby, you probably know this because you see me on LinkedIn all the time, but Gary Vaynerchuk is like,
Hmm.
and he goes by Gary V. He's like hands down one of my favorite people to follow. And the only reason why, not the only reason why, but a huge portion of the reason that I do follow him is because I had met him and knew him way back when he was just managing his dad's wine shop. And
Wow.
I worked at the bank next door and I handled the deposits. Like I was the person who did that. And I remember a couple years later, like after college, and I remember somebody said to me like, "Hey, you should check out this book, Crush It." And it's by this guy, Gary. And I was like, "Oh, like let me read it." And I was reading through it, and it was the Gary from the wine library in Summit, New Jersey. And I was like, "Oh, do I? Is this the guy?" And I was like, "No friggin' way. He wrote this book." And so I read the book and I was like, "This is amazing." By the way, like strong recommend if you're like
Okay.
getting your legs and like trying to figure stuff out for yourself. Crush It is like an amazing book. That was one of my very first like professional books that I read. Um, really strong recommend for it, but I read it and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. Like he wrote a book. Cool." And then like he's slowly gained momentum over the years and now he has basically reinvented himself. This is a person that was running a liquor store. Like literally, this is what
Mhm.
he was doing. And he took it and he just kept leaning into his passion, which by the way, Lean In is another professional book that I read early in my career.
Yeah.
These are all like my faves. But these people, like he really just like took his passion and he kept working on it and he kept turning it into different things. And now he's this media guy and he does all these really cool interviews. Like if I could ever be interviewed with him, like my life would be complete. Like that would literally be like,
Mm.
but it's folks like him that like just tried stuff and they just tried what they were passionate about, what was making them happy, and it led him down a whole other path. And I think that that's really important for people to really recognize now because you don't have to go to the traditional 9 to 5 anymore. Like that's not really a thing. I mean, it's a thing, but you don't have to.
Let's take a quick break. Are you interested in podcasting but not sure where to start? My name is Jenny Benitez, and I'm here to help guide you through your podcast launch and maintenance. Check out the link in the episode description for Podcasting Unboxed, your comprehensive startup guide. I am very excited to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I know, and I was raised by my parents. My parents were great. They were great parents, but they were very much like, you have to go to college and you
Yeah.
have to go to grad school and then you have to get a job. And I'm like, I mean, fortunately, I fit into that mold. I did want to be an artist for a while, so my parents are probably glad I'm not a full-time artist. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to fit into that mold. Like, people have all different types of careers. They have multiple jobs. They moonlight in things. Like, nothing is really like for certain. So I think you kind of just have to put yourself out there and find what works for you. And like, I've definitely thought about it before. Like, I'm very much a night owl, so I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if I could like work nights or work evenings and then have my days a little bit more free? And I've thought about pursuing that. So maybe that's a thing I would look at in the future, in another life. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options. You don't just have to follow the one linear path of like going to school and deciding your
Right.
entire life before your brain is fully formed.
That was like the big thing too. I remember like I very much was a creative when I was in grammar school and in high school. And I loved just I was very into drawing and very into like that kind of creative. And then creative writing was huge for me in high school. Like I loved writing. I used to write in grammar school and high school. I used to write like I would get so into it and I would sit for hours. And this is like back in the day before I had a computer, and I would literally, I mean, write like my handwriting. I would write short stories and poems and like all this stuff. And then I got to a point when I was getting older in high school, and I think it was like my junior year or senior year, and it kind of the whole my parents had separated at that point, and the whole reality of like life was really hitting me pretty hard because of what I was going through with my family. And I was like, I was observing what my parents went through, and I was like, I have to have a job where I am making enough money that no one will ever be able to walk away from me and leave me in dire straits. Like that was like a pivotal
Yeah.
little Jenny moment where I think I was like 16 or 17, and I was just like, screw the creative part of you. You have to make a lot of money. Like you have to do something because honestly, like, and that was like a turning point in my life because, my parents separated, my dad left, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom before that. And she didn't work. And so when he left, she had to get a job, and she was struggling. Like it was hard. And that impacted how I treated everything and what I ended up doing. And so for me, it was like, you're going to college because you're gonna make a lot of money. Like you're gonna make sure that no one can ever do to you what just happened to your mother. And that basically impacted my whole life. So it's funny. It's almost full circle for me for now that now I'm leaning back into my creative part because that's really where I wanted to always be. But I just couldn't do it at that point in time. I was like, no, there's no way I can do that.
Yeah. And like I mean, I think that's totally fine. Like sometimes you just have to think that way. And like you're doing it now, like and I think that's really what counts is that you had to do what you had to do at the time and you were a different person then. And you learned and you grew and your career has changed just like you've changed as you've aged and matured and had different experiences. So like that's really all you can do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because like and I think I when I was taking these summer classes and stuff like that about like meditation and all that stuff, I think I was telling you and our other friend Jen,
Yeah.
who you've all heard on another episode. Um, but and I was telling you guys about these meditations and stuff, and like it was really through meditating and through doing, I know it sounds like hippie-ish. But it was through doing that I really like kind of came back around and was like, oh, I really want to go back into being
Yeah.
creative and writing articles and like just kind of going with the flow with that kind of thing. So I do think you're right. Like there's like a place for it basically kind of thing. Like I had to do what I had to do in the moment, but now I get to come back around and do this with you and it's cool.
Yeah. You should be really proud of yourself. That is like a really cool career path and you've had a lot of really great experience in different areas and like you said, you've been doing the personal work, you've been taking classes and learning and growing and self-reflecting and like that really is the key to like creating a happy life and just thinking about where you want to go in the future.
I think the self-reflecting part is something to take a beat on and kind of just talk about
Hmm.
for a minute because I think a lot of people struggle with the self reflection. I think we're all really good at criticizing ourselves. I'm pretty sure we all are very good at being critical of ourselves, but really reflecting on like where you are, how you're feeling about stuff, and where do you want to go from here. A big thing I had started to do, I think I started doing about 14 or 15 years ago, I would do like check-ins and kind of ask myself like, am I happy? Like, is this making me happy? And that sounds really like strange because you would think that in the moment you know what you're feeling, but really think about that. Like, and I want the listeners to think about that too. Like, you should really be doing gut checks with yourself and say like, you're dating somebody, if you're married, totally fine. If you're single, new job, any job, like whatever the case may be, whatever the situation is, anything that's presented to you before responding, just think to yourself, like, is this something I really want to do? Is this making me happy? Am I excited to do this? Does this feel like an obligation? Does this feel bad? Do I feel frustrated? Because what I used to do many, many years ago was that I would kind of just guess everything. I was very much I wanted to people please and I wanted everyone to be happy and whatever. And in doing that though, I was really alienating myself because everything I did was really like, oh, well, so and so needs me to do this and now I have to do that. And now I have to do this. And I got to a point where I was like, am I doing anything for me? Like, is any of this for me? And I think a lot of people miss that and they don't really realize like they're not happy because they're doing everything they feel obligated to do.
Yes, I love that you said that because I think I went through the exact same thing where I think as women, we're socialized to be accommodating and nurturing and people pleasers and put every single person in the entire world before ourselves, even at our own detriment. And I think after a while, um, I'm sure there's people in the world who are much more patient than I am and are still doing that to this day. But I think a lot of people get frustrated and they think like, if I don't put me first, who is going to put me first? And I think you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another point about, I also kind of struggled when I first became self-aware, started like working on that aspect of my life where a lot of people they say they don't know what they want. And that's because they've
Mm-hmm.
become so disconnected from themselves and they haven't been listening to themselves. And it's not their fault necessarily. It's just that like we are so socialized to pay attention to the world around us and serve others and be in service to your job and your boss and your partner and your children and things like that. And like all of those have their own place. Like it's very good to put in the effort in those areas of your life. But like if you are so open to the suggestion of other people, you will completely lose sight of what you like and what you want. And I think that's sort of like the first step for a lot of people is like unlearning all of the not bad, but I mean, unlearning all of the things, the detrimental things that sort of take them away from advocating for themselves and
Mm-hmm.
knowing themselves. And I think especially for women, like we are really socialized to not advocate for ourselves, to not prioritize our wants and our needs. So as a woman, if you can just keep those in mind and make a game plan or even just keep them in mind when you're making decisions, like you are already making a very powerful both personal statement to yourself and how you'll be treated by those around you and also a political one.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's you'll be surprised too if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I haven't been feeling great about my life, or I'm not happy and I don't really know what to do, or even in what Abby's just said, like if you're like, I don't know what I want to do, it's like, well, it's because you really haven't been listening to yourself. You do know what you want to do, but you're probably brushed it aside. Um, the most interesting thing I think is that when you do start to make these shifts and you are only doing things that bring you joy, the amount of people that drop out of your life is astounding.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's like the easiest way to like get rid of people who don't have your best interest at heart or aren't even just like
Mm-hmm.
on your team without doing any work yourself.
You don't have to do anything.
You don't have to do anything. They will drop like flies.
And it's crazy because you'll be able to tell within days, even, who really has your best interest and who really, and I'm not even just talking about like, oh, friends, like family members. I'm a big believer that just because you're a blood relative to somebody does not mean that they get a pass to treat you like crap. Like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that for so long, for like ever, has always been like, well, they're family. Oh, look the other way, they're family. Like at least in my family, that's always, oh, well, they're family. Jenny, it's your
Yeah.
family. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care because at the end of the day, if you're not somebody who makes an effort to be part of my life, if you're somebody who's negative and toxic, like if you're, if you have like that toxicity where I'm like, I don't really want to be around you, like you take everything I say and turn it around and twist it, like I'm cool, like I'm all right. I don't need that kind of vibe in my life. But yeah, it's wild when you do start to make these shifts for yourself because your mother will even, people that you wouldn't even think come out of the woodwork and be like, oh my God, and start judging you and trying to push you into the direction that they're most comfortable. And really what it is that people who are also unhappy are going to see you making these big shifts into a positive direction. And it's going to make them uncomfortable because now they're going to be seeing, well, oh, she's doing this. Like, oh, well, I'm going to judge her because it's truly because they're probably feeling bad about themselves that they are not also making these shifts and these changes. So it truly is one of those things that like, it's the fastest way to get rid of toxic people is to just start paying attention to yourself and being yourself and advocating for yourself. And you'll see right away who really, really has your back. Like it's astounding.
Yeah, exactly. Like it is, I think that is kind of how I became aware of a lot of those things and like have been sort of putting the pieces together like through therapy and like self-reflection over the past few years. Like I did kind of realize if I do what this person wants me to do, like what about what I want and what about my happiness? Like I cannot continue to just sacrifice myself for other people. And it is kind of incredible how, when you put your own best interest first, how many people realize they cannot use you
Mm-hmm.
for their own personal gain and will remove themselves from your life accordingly, which is a blessing in many ways. Like, you don't want people around you who have vibes and are like secretly wishing on your downfall.
That's the other thing too, is that like it will, if you are going down that path of like you're trying to like rejigger your life and you're like, I do see this and I do think I want to really start paying more attention to how I'm feeling about stuff. The first thing is going to happen is everyone's going to push back, but you have to stand your ground
Mm-hmm.
and just keep checking in with yourself. Do I feel good about this decision? Am I happy deep down? Like when I lay my head down on my pillow at night, am I proud of the day that I just lived? Because that's so important. And so many people are on autopilot and just going through the motions just to get through it. And why would you live your life like that? Well, maybe we get one chance down here, right? Depending on what you believe, because I'm on the fence. Maybe you get one shot down here, right? And you make the most of it. Like how don't go on autopilot. Like really live your life. Like don't just go through the motions. Like do something that really sparks joy in you and makes you feel alive because otherwise you're just a drone and you're just kind of going through it. And like who don't do that to yourself. You have so much more to offer. And everybody, I know that there's a lot of folks that are like, actually me included, I'm very much of a person that's like, I don't really have any talent. Like I'm not talented in any particular way. Right? Like that's how I feel most of the time. Like I'm not really people are like, what are your hobbies? I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't really have any. But like that in itself is like also like I think a lot of people feel that way, but there is nobody else on this earth, even if you have a twin, there is nobody else on this earth like you. You're the only person that's you. So that means you already have something unique to show the world. And you need to lean into that because that's really where you're going to find like the most joy for yourself. Um, but yeah, stand your ground. If you are deciding to like go this path of like cleaning house basically, and you're like, I need to make 2024 into something great, really lean into what's making me happy and excited and watch all of the bodies start to drop basically because that's what's basically going to happen.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I think that's really important. And also at the end of the day, like you are the one living your life. You have to live with yourself and your decisions. So it is most important that you are okay with it and
Hmm.
that you are aligned with that.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate because I know a lot of folks, myself included, because it's taken me a really long time to get to where I am and to be comfortable with myself and to like be comfortable as a human person and to be really, really happy. It takes time. It's not an overnight thing. It takes time. And
Mm-hmm.
but start now, start today. If you're listening to this episode, this happens every once in a while where I'll have an episode and in the episode, I have this feeling of someone's going to hear this and be like, I need to make a change. And I'm saying that here now because it feels like one of those episodes. And if you are hearing this, maybe it is time for a change. It can be small. Just start with that barometer of your feelings and like, does this feel good? Like, am I happy? You'll see your life will take a whole different course. Um, with that in mind, that goes professionally and personally. Like, am I happy doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this okay for me? If you find yourself professionally in situations that you're consistently uncomfortable with, if you find professionally you log off from your job or you leave your office if you're in a live situation and you're pissed off, you're probably not at a good place. You're probably not at a place where you're supposed to be. And you really need to start thinking about what that means for you and moving on from there because the longer you stay in a place like that, the more it will change you and the more it's going to change the kind of person you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And like at the end of the day, like a job is just a job. Like, of course, we need money to live. And like here in the United States, like our jobs are wrapped up with our health insurance. And like that is really deeply unfortunate. And I'd like that to change. But like, I know we spend a lot of time at work. We probably should spend a lot less time at work. But like, you can just, it can be a transitionary period for you. Like you can let it teach you and you can use it to like grow and self-reflect and guide you into what you really want to be doing or something that might be a better fit for you. But yeah, no, I think that's really important is like when you notice something is hardening you or making it harder to have boundaries between work and your personal life, that is like a really good indicator that something needs to change.
Yeah, exactly. I had written very, very short article for LinkedIn and it called it like living to work or working to live. And our culture, we I've had the pleasure of working with folks outside of the US and our culture in the United States is I mean, I think the only other place that's probably worse than us is like Japan or China. I know that they're like really heavy on like work over there.
Yeah.
Um, but we basically like our lives are sucked up by work. And myself included have been somebody who's like, I love work and I'll work 60 hours a week and, and I'll do all this stuff. And that only shifted for me in the last couple of years because prior to like 2019, I had no problem working all kinds of wild hours until 3 a.m. or whatever and doing all this stuff just because I loved what I was doing so much. And it's not to say that I don't love what I'm doing now, but I noticed like it pulling away from my life and like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not like, there's this quote that went around LinkedIn and it was basically like, your job will replace you. If you died today, your job will have a posting
Yeah.
to replace you within like 24 hours or 48 hours. Well, your family can never get you back. Your friends will never get you back. They can't replace you. And that's incredibly important for people to really recognize is that like you're replaceable. You are just a number. Anybody can really come in and step into your shoes. Like, yes, everyone puts their own finishing touches on things, but anyone can come in and do your job. So don't kill yourself for your career or for your profession. I know early on, like it's important to really show up and really dig in. Like I did that early on in my profession, but don't let it run your whole life is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, it is one part of your life, it's not your entire life, and you can always change. And I mean, yeah, we've seen so many layoffs in the past year. There are so
Yeah.
many people who thought, especially I've seen a lot of really heartbreaking stuff on LinkedIn of like people who worked at places for decades and wanted to be like a lifer and then got laid off because of
Mm-hmm.
something completely out of their control. Like you really have to be able and willing to pivot, and just really have that adaptability and just being flexible.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. So I mean, I know we I know we bounced around a little bit on this episode, but I think it was all like important, impactful things. Um, just kind of key takeaway, like really be mindful of what you're doing and how you're feeling about things. And I mean, if you are truly happy working loads of hours, like, I mean, God bless you, but you know, try to do things outside of work is all I'm saying. Um, Abby, any last thoughts for our listeners?
No, I think you summarized it up really well. Yeah, I think definitely Pinterest. One of my suggestions for your show notes is that Pinterest has a lot of really good like journaling suggestions for just
Oh,
like working on self-reflection and like different prompts on like work and how to become closer to the person you want to become and things like that. So those have been really helpful and really useful for me. And yeah.
that's a really interesting tip. I would have never picked up. I would have never known that because Pinterest is like
Oh
my,
yeah, I can send you some if you
oh
want.
yeah.
I love Pinterest. I have so many boards.
Oh my God, no, you know what? I'll send you like my name or whatever on there, whatever, so you can find me. But yeah, like I am on there all the time, but I'm always on there for like recipes and like clothes. So like, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, I hope you all found this episode informative. I hope you found it insightful. And I hope you do take something away from it that will better your life and help you to live a more authentic life and show up as authentically you. Um, Abby, thank you for joining me for this episode. I really appreciate it. I know we tried a couple times to record, and this is like we finally did it, so I'm excited.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much. I had so much fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Stay tuned for next week's episode, and we'll talk to you then. Have a good night.